across the entire campus. So I'm really, really excited about this. It is going to save a lot of time. I have some statistics to share with you, which you might find interesting. So how many of you work with deans? Okay, so if you had to get like 5 signatures on a document that dealt with a dean, a chief fiscal officer, a couple of other muckety-mucks like that, how long do you think it would take? Chasing them down, how long does it usually take?
Days.
Days?
About a week.
About a week? So in arts and sciences, through the pilot, our executive dean was able to turn around most of his average turnaround time for things that he had to sign was 11 hours. 11 hours even when he was traveling. Our chair of the Department of Physics, who is, has probably more than 120 segments of flights, he probably has double that every year, is constantly on the road. His average turnaround time was like an hour and a half. Our senior fiscal officer's turnaround time for anything he had to sign was half an hour. One of our division deans, his turnaround time was in the hour kind of range. It's amazing how quickly business happens when you're able to just sign things electronically. So that was one of the most amazing things that we saw through the pilot process. The other cool thing that we saw, I don't know how my technical colleagues would feel about this, but from my perspective, the cool thing was the tech people got the heck out of the way. So, usually when we go to set up some kind of a workflow, there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of whiteboarding, there's a lot of requirements gathering, we have to pull together a programming team, it takes months to get something rolled out. With the electronic signature system that we're going to talk about today, any person here can set up documents for routing. Any person here can set up forms to go gather signatures. It's really easy, and when we train folks, they're up and running on this system in about an hour, just to get the basic stuff out. And then if you want to do more sophisticated things with it, it's maybe another couple of hours of training. We've now got 400 people involved in a campus-wide pilot. They've been working together over the past year, and these are mostly people that are, like yourselves, administrators working in units across the university, folks in arts and sciences, student life, CFAS, other units on campus. How many of you have actually encountered electronic signatures with DocuSign while you're thinking? What have been your reactions? Is it really hard?
No.
Does it take forever? You can even do it on your phone. That's what I like about it. I can do it on my phone. So rather than talk about, imagine if you will, we're going to actually show you what it looks like. So here with my colleagues today, Steve Lind and Doug Beck. Please say hi. Steve is, so we've gone through this pilot. We're now to the point where we're, as the Office of the CIO, transitioning this into a campus-wide service. So Steve is the project manager who's responsible for taking this pilot and turning it into a campus-wide service that we can roll out across the university. He's the project manager of this, as well as another project that dovetails closely with it called the the Enterprise Document Management Project, EDM, because we have to have,
More acronyms.
Exactly. We're IT, and we're IT in a public sector organization.
Right.
We have acronyms, requirement. So the EDM system, what's cool about DocuSign and EDM working together, if you imagine like an offer letter that ultimately needs to end up in a personnel folder that can be seen within your unit and maybe at your college level, and then maybe also shared with OHR. That's how we're envisioning these systems working together. Enterprise document management is like a file system on steroids, if you will, where you can say, show me all the offer letters that were done in the last year, and it'll bring you the actual offer letters together. And then, the electronic signature piece can help be the thing that goes out and gets all those signatures from folks who are scattered all over the place, who are constantly traveling, all in a really timely way. So Steve's going to give you an overview of what these two things look like and how they fit together. And then Doug's going to give us a demonstration of what the electronic signature system looks like. We're going to go through an I-9 form. That's going to be part of the pilot process. We're here to answer any questions that you have. We'd like to come back, hopefully, to this group sometime when we're closer to rolling this out and talk to you about the logistics of rolling it out. So maybe we can chat about what that might look like in the summer or when we're ready. But for now, we're just going to whet your appetite. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve and take it away.
Thanks, Diane. So Doug and I are going to work together. Doug unfortunately has a little bit of a cold, so his voice voice isn't as up to snuff as normal.
You have to act it out there.
Exactly. So he's going to drive and I'm going to talk. So you're going to get hopefully the best of both worlds. But like Diane said, you know, e-signature and EDM were brought together as one project within the OCIO. And so today we're going to talk about both. Try to give you an idea of what is electronic signature versus document management. As Diane said, give you an example of actually going into the e-signature tool, uploading a template, and showing you how easy it is to send that out. And then show a couple of screenshots of what is electronic document management, what does that tool look like, and how can you use that. And then there are some things that we'll send out the slide deck. We might not be able to get to just out of time constraints, but there will be some other material in the deck. So you can go ahead. So really simple, straightforward, right? Electronic signatures is just what you think it would be, right? If we can take a paper form and route it for signature, you can take the electronic form and do the same thing. And it enables you to not only, as Diane said, send it through the process, but monitor the process. So if it has to go through 3 or 4 stops, and you wonder, hey, I sent this out, where is it? Well, you can just go online and find out, oh, it's with this person. It's been there for X number of hours. Maybe they haven't seen the email. If it's urgent, you might want to follow up so you know exactly who to follow up with. So it gives you that ability to track the form. And then electronic document management, it starts off, I think, as being just a very secure repository, specifically for data that we call restricted or private. So if you're familiar with those terms from the institutional data policy, the data that we want to make sure we're managing really well for the university, this is the solution for that. And then it also allows us to do some integration. So if we want to do something, for example, if we route a form through e-signature, and based on somebody filling out an answer in the form, we wanted to go do something, we probably then route that through the electronic document management workflow. So, and this is a bit of review. So the e-signature has been in pilot, if you will, for 2 years, so that, as you might imagine, it's a long pilot. But if you think about during that time period what was going on within the OCIO, there was the PeopleSoft upgrade, so there's a lot of resources focused on that. It just wasn't something that we were able to take on at the time, and Diane was able to shepherd this up there.
But let me say, we had to get permission from the governor to establish our own rules, so there's that.
Okay, there's those other things, right?
And he doesn't do it. His office didn't fill out the paperwork in the state.
Yeah. So, and that's a great example. I think a lot of what we're going to do with the technology is pretty straightforward. I think a lot of the process change, not just capital P process, but the small p, like how do I do things and when do I do things, that is what's going to take a little bit of time for people to get familiar and comfortable with sending it out electronically as opposed to just printing it and routing it. The thing that I think is really impressive, 400 users, but it's been used 25,000 times. I mean, that, holy smokes, talk about, getting out of the way, right? If IT can set something up and just get out of the way and let people use it, that to me is proof right there. And then in the scope, as Diane said, there's a lot of policy and approval and kind of, permission work that needs to get approved before we can roll this out completely to the university. So that work is in progress right now. And then, we have a service offering. So if you're familiar with the service catalog, where you can request services, this will be a service out there. Developing the training and job aids, so people that have used the signing process, and you'll see even, the author process. It is pretty straightforward, but we still want to make sure we have job aids to help you, because there are going to be some folks that will probably do this very frequently and they'll be very proficient with it, and there'll be some folks that do it every once in a while. They'll just want to pull up that reference and say, oh yeah, what are the 5 steps I need to do? And then we're integrating it with your name.n, so we can have security. So when we send it to Lynn.26, it really is me, and I log in with my password to verify that it's me. Then obviously rolling this out across the university. So a couple of terms, and these are pretty obvious, and they're used, I think, exactly as you'd expect, but just to cover them. So a template, so any form that you might have, when I say pre-configured, what I mean by that is if you have a PDF and you've said these are the fields that people need to fill in, that's exactly how the template works in e-signature. You know, these are the fields that they would fill in, and it would prompt them to fill in those fields. Look for the question, no, just the answer. And then you can, you know, once you create a template, you can share it with either individuals or you can share it with groups. So that whole concept is built in. And like I said, it's similar to the editable PDF. And then an envelope, again, if you're familiar with the paper envelope, right, you can put multiple things into an envelope. Here you can put in a template, which would be something pre-configured. You could put in another document, like a Word document, Excel document, free form. So there are going to be some things that we're going to say, like the I-9, here's the form to use for the university. There are going to be some things that will be a one-off. I need to get a signature on, and I don't even know what a good example is,
Offer letter.
but yeah, an offer letter, right? And it has to go to these two people. And the next offer letter is going to go to two other people, right? So those would be unique examples. So I think with this, Doug, we're going to jump into the, looking at the I-9 form. So Doug's actually going to jump over and go to the DocuSign website. And we've done a little bit of preparation work here because we knew we had kind of a time constraint to work under. But so Doug's going to just start off with saying, hey, we're going to create a template. And like we said, the template is the form that everybody's going to refer to. And you can use the template, reuse it multiple times. So as you're building a template, you have to determine really what's the scope of the template. So in I-9, we think there should be one I-9 form that all the university can use, right? And we should work to get to that state. If there are offer letters or if there are other things that might be specific to your unit or your college, you could set up a template for that, right? And you could build the template to the amount of detail that you require. So if we go in, it's really straightforward. If you saw, you probably said create template. Brings you over to the screen, you give it a template name, and probably develop a convention where you might want to put your college or your unit or something in front of that if it's a template specifically for you. If it's a generic template, obviously we'll follow a more common name structure. Description that makes sense. And then here we'll have the units or the groups set up that you can share with. If it's something that you say, oh, I want to share it with all the administrators and I want to share it with Diane. Well, then you could flip over and you could look at the members and you could select that person, right? So there's a lot of granularity in how far you want to share the documents. And then as you go down, just simply browse for the form on your computer. So it's really straightforward. And I think Doug pulled this off from the HR website. So it uploads, and what it'll do is it'll look at the form, and if it has fields, and if it can identify that the form has fields, it'll basically point out to say, I can see there's some fields in here. Do you want me to use them? So you say yes, or you can say no if you want to relay out the whole form. I don't think you want to, but so we'll say apply. And what it'll do is as it imports the document, it'll look through all those PDF fields and it'll highlight them. So then we're going to take a look at this template and say, all right, what is the typical routing for an I-9 form? And when we're filling this out, you can fill in just a generic role. So you could say it should go to, is it going to the employee first? Okay, so it could just go to the employee. And then you can continue to add individuals. So if it should go to 2, 3, 4, 5 people. One of the things you'll see right here is it says the order number is both 1 at this time. And what that means is that when you send it, it would potentially route to both people at the same time. If you want it to go in a sequential form, obviously you change this to 2. So now it goes to the employee, and then it'll go to the HR rep, right? So if you're getting to the point where you want to create a form for your college, you can actually say, the role is employee, and you're going to put a specific name here. And then every time you bring the template up, it'll always be populated with that name. So, there's an ability to specialize the forms. In this example, we're just going to leave those blank because anytime someone picks up the I-9, they'll pick it up, they'll specify who is the employee email address, who's the HR email address. A lot of options that as we go through training with you and your unit, we'll obviously walk you through specifically what each of these checkboxes mean and give you, in general, we set it up to have the correct defaults, but there will be use cases where you might want to do something additional beyond what we have set up. So what Doug's done now is he said, yeah, let's use this form. And you can see it really is the form. I mean, it's exactly the form. And one of the things you'll see, so right up here, you can select between the two roles. So I don't know, Doug, if you can hit the drop down. I don't know if my finger better.
They might like the
This is
rest.
dangerous. Let's see. There. So what you can do is, within this form, you can look at the fields that are on the form, the fields that it's identified, and you can say, okay, there are specific fields that the employee needs to fill out. And so there are specific fields that the employee can fill out, and there are specific fields that the HR rep should fill out, right? And you can say that as you scroll down, and Doug, if you can, I don't know, maybe like page 8. Yeah, and you can notice, if you look on the far side, where the pages are grayed out, no form, no fields to fill out, but where you can see the yellow, there are fields on that page to fill out. So you can highlight for me as an employee, right, these are the fields that they need to fill out. And that when the form is forwarded, you can allow others to edit those if you wish, or you can lock those down to say no. Once the employee fills out the information, it's going to stay static. You'll notice that the social security number is required on the form, and that's some of our restricted data. So within the tool, you can ask it to mask out that content. So if I fill in my social security number and it moves on to the HR rep, all they would see would be asterisk. So while we would have the data, we can get to it. If you want to exclude people from seeing it, we have that ability to hide that from them. So it gives you a lot of functionality, right? So it does allow us to follow our institutional data policy, and it has controls in there that allow us to restrict access to that information. So then I don't know, Doug, if you set up some things for the HR role, and there's some tabs that, or fields you have there?
Most of the tabs that are set up here are for the person to fill in, that you're sending to the new hire, I would call. And then you switch it over.
So you can see where these fields are now editable for the HR rep, where they weren't editable for the employee. And then Doug has actually sent that to me. I can try to do this real time, but as Diane said, you know, one of the neat things is it could go to your phone, it can go to your iPad. And I mean, you can see it right here, and I'll just, if you want to pass it around, if anybody wants to take a look at it, it's, you know, as you can imagine, when you get to the sign here, you can grab the sign here and use your finger to sign. You can select a font if you want, and it will show you cursive, you know, different styles of cursive that are representative of your signature.
Steve, could you talk about, all right, so you created a template, but the template is, you do that once.
Right.
And then after you've set up the template the first time, you can go in and continue to send that out again and again and again.
Yes, you know, to go through, create an envelope and then.
And the one thing I also wanted to point out, if you can, I sent this to Steve this morning to sign. I think one of the powerful pieces of DocuSign is the ability to manage these envelopes. I forget who mentioned to me today that you sent something out, and a couple weeks later, someone is asking you, hey, where is this? And you really don't know because you sent it as an envelope. If you look up on the screen there, I know right now it's next to sign is Steve Lynn. So if somebody asks me, where is this envelope? I could simply say, I'm waiting on Steve. And I can pick up the phone and say, Steve, get it together, or however it is you want to manage that.
I have a question too. Is there an ability to copy someone? So let's say that my boss needs to sign something. Can I be copied on the envelope? Or let's say that somebody sends me the envelope thinking that maybe I might connect with him and ask him to
Right.
sign. Am I able to forward the email to him so that he can access the envelope, or how does that work?
So there are two different ways, and I don't know, Doug, you went back to the roles?
Yeah,
Okay.
to just
So when we were adding the roles of people down here, and, you know, we said employee, there's an action tab out there, and I think if a little bit more.
And I would say, can you do a control plus, because it's kind of hard to see.
Oh, can you make it bigger? Same way. Is that good?
There's too much glitter.
All right, so then scroll down a little bit, yeah. You were not- well, I did. All right, well, maybe you have to, you can't, right now his browser's allowing it to scroll down. All right, that's good. So, if you look at the action, yeah, right there. So sign is what you'd expect, somebody's going to actually physically sign the document. You know, the sign in person would be if I wanted to actually bring my iPad with me and say, I'm gonna sit with you while you sign it, so it doesn't necessarily get routed to you as an email. But you can acknowledge receipt, you can receive a copy right there, so if you just wanted to see, so if you want to have a checkpoint, you know, like 4 steps in the process, you want to just receive a copy, say, okay, yeah, this looks right before it goes on someplace.
So you could simply just add an additional role for that person if you want to just receive a copy. And just say,
And if you want, yeah, exactly, if you wanted to reroute it, or reroute it, if it came to you for signature and you said, really, I shouldn't be signing it, it should go somewhere else, you could change the email and send it to that person, right? So, that answers your, okay, good.
Well, it's very helpful to us as administrative assistants is because sometimes we need to know our boss is traveling
Right,
and he or she may not have ready access to email. Or likewise, sometimes we get things that people want us to forward to our bosses instead. And so it's nice to have that
Right.
option.
But
And
it's
if-
not for the email, you have to do it through the system.
Gotcha.
You have to go in and get the form and then reassign it to your boss, or reassign it to the person who's substituting for that, for your boss, or whoever's supposed to sign it in the meantime. It's not forward the email to them. Because if you forward the email to them and they click the link, it'll sign the original person's name. So you go in and you reroute it, but the forms can be sent up so that there's that flexibility.
because right now, one of the settings is allow recipient to change signing responsibility. So I'll allow it.
so that Diane brings up a good point. And this is, can you think of it as an issue or a feature of the system? But if, you know, you receive an email and the email says, please sign. So if I were to forward that email on to anyone, they would be signing as me, not as them, but as me. So the system is set up that way, I think, to allow people that might be in a role where they need to forward it on to someone else or to sign on their behalf. For us, we don't see that as a feature, right? We like to be a little bit more controlled around knowing who signed off. So that is, you know, the control that we put in around that is that you would go in back into DocuSign and change where it should be routed. So it achieves the same thing, but with a little bit better control. So, Doug, you would set up an envelope and send it out?
Yeah.
So one of the things that, you know, the system's been in pilot for 2 years, and there are 400 different templates that have been set up. So quite a few. Now, a lot of that could just be experimenting, right? I'm gonna try this and see if this works, I'm gonna try this and see if this works. But the beautiful thing of the template is, as I said, you can either set them up to be completely generic, so that everybody has the same copy of I-9. You can set them up to say, well, this is the College of Nursing's version of this form, right? And it has specific routing related to the College of Nursing. So, I think Doug's trying to get a volunteer so that he can route a document out to them for signature. But what you do then is, are you in the template phase still here? I think he's still making a template. But what you do is an envelope, you would, I think Doug will get to this, but you'll create the envelope, and where it's asking you to fill in emails for generic roles, you have to specify that. It will specify if you want follow-up emails, so the system can do automatic reminders. So, if you wait 2 days before it gets a reminder, and every day afterward, how we want to set those follow-ups on.
I think you were speaking about the reminders. So you can expire an envelope in 10 days, 30 days, 90 days, whatever you think is appropriate for your business process. I think a lot of what I've seen with the pilot group is 90 days. And then they send out reminders maybe every 3 days, for example. I think that's what Steve was just referring to. You're going to come in and actually assign these. Oh, because I'm in both. Let me log out of this.
So, yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know.
I'm in the system twice as
If,
myself, so it doesn't like what I just did, so bear with me. Sorry.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, definitely.
So you talked about if you route the document to someone, they can sign from their phone or iPad with their
Mhm.
finger.
Right?
But if you're on your PC, is it
You
like
could use
a-
your mouse if you wanted to, or like I said, you can select a font that would represent cursive, and they're, go ahead.
the reason why I'm asking is because right now Carol has an electronic signature that we use for some documents. Usually it's like stuff that she has to sign 100 copies of
Sure.
or something like that. So I just replaced, it's just, I don't know if it's a JPEG image of her real signature. Is that an option for if you're signing from your?
To import that
to
signature?
import a-
So, yeah, you can go into DocuSign, and you can adjust that, yeah. Probably a lot easier to look at.
Can I interject here?
Sure.
It seems like you have the impression that you sign each time, you draw the signature each time. That's not the case. You only set it up once. And then every time you go to apply the signature, it takes that signature that was set up and sticks it there.
Yeah.
So probably she could sign the first time with her iPad, and then that
Right.
would be her signature. for
If you
everyone.
already have that image, you can just import that image and use that.
Yeah, exactly. Good question.
There you go.
Nothing like my pen.
After we send this out, it'll be fun, I think, to see when Steve's talking about the signature. Once everybody signs it, then we'll take a look at what a signed document looks like, and then it'll start to flip everything. The other thing I would say is, Steve, or Doug started with a very common use case, which is a fillable form. But oftentimes, we need to circulate things, that just need a signature. It's just one line, like an offer letter. We just need one person's signature. It's a Word document. The person who's offering the job signs here, like Carol, and then the applicant who receives it, they sign on their line, and that's it. That stuff is really easy to set up. You upload the Word file, like you saw Doug upload the PDF form, and you just drag like a sign here flag. You pick Carol from the drop-down list, drag sign here to where she's supposed to sign, and then choose the applicant or the new employee from the drop-down list, drag the sign here to where they're supposed to sign, put date signed, next to it, it will automatically put the date in, and you're done, and you send it out. It's really fast. It's a really nice, it's really slick.
I think you might have answered the other question that I had, which was, you can use this system for people outside of the university
Yes.
to
Correct.
sign?
So what we'll do is.
Can I be in the pilot?
Please. sit next to the person who
I
can say
know,
yes.
we'll talk.
Next to the right.
So are you piloting by units or departments or individuals? How are you piloting?
We have permission, so this is where the policy stuff that Steve was talking about before comes into play. So in order for the university to be able to legally accept an electronic signature as a legally binding signature, we have to have a policy in place. And we had to go to the governor seriously and get legislation signed that enabled Ohio State to set up its own rules for the use of electronic signatures. And that's what Catherine referred to. The Board of Trustees approved that in January. So in those rules, it specifies that we have to have a policy. And the policy is done, and we're now going through the final, legal affairs has to sign off, and then senior management council, and then president's cabinet. That's why Eunice contacted you the other day.
April.
Right, April. So April timeframe is when that's going to happen. So until that happens, we only have permission to use DocuSign and electronic signatures for the HR pilot across campus. So if you want to try it for offer letters or for hiring documents or for new hire packets or things like that, you know, we can certainly kind of scoot you in the tail end. But we're not permitted to use it yet for any other function, although I would say some units are kind of experimenting, things, you know, that don't leave their organizational boundaries. But we don't have permission to use it for anything besides that because there's this policy piece. And as Q said, you know, the intent here, how many of you use the contract portal or have to deal with that? Right, so the intent here is to replace the contract portal with this system, you know, DocuSign. We accept hugs, we accept, but DocuSign and electronic document management together is gonna replace the contract portal, but we need to make sure we can legally accept signatures for that. So that's why it's a limited pilot right now. So if you wanna do hiring, we know.
Is that, are you still in progress?
I'm adopting sign.
Yeah. Greens, did you sign it?
She's
with your
adopting
finger?
somebody
Signed
today.
it with my finger in it. Just so you know. Kind of like my birthday. Oh, finish.
Okay, this is, I think, what Steve and Diane were referring to in terms of, I always think of this as anything you used to send out via envelope, paper envelope, you can now, the power of DocuSign, you can manage it all right here. So, I can see that Maureen signed it, and next to sign is me.
Where do you see that?
At the very bottom of the screen, do you guys see it?
No.
Well, you just-
Oh. I did that on purpose.
Right, so you can see where Doug sent it, where it was signed, and now it's routed on to Doug.
So my Ohio State email also told me Maureen had muted. And then it says, please review and sign my document. I'm gonna just do it, I'm already in the system.
Well, show how it links.
Oh, okay. So this is what it will look like if you are an author or someone who sent this out. Just click on review, click the start button. I'm going to sign right here. Please, first
So like Diane said, because Doug's already used this system, it has his signature. So when he clicked sign here, you really don't have to do anything. He just clicked sign here and it applied his signature image to it, right? So it's a one-time setup, but that's why it's very easy to do, right? And then if you put the time and the date in there, it automatically populates when you did the click.
So I signed it, it automatically put the date in. I had to put in the employee's first day of employment. Confirm the signing. It is complete.
All right, so now it's telling you this envelope is completed, right? It will show you all the statuses and the time. So And this is where, you know, we can start to capture some metrics around, are there, yes?
Can you then view the final document that I signed and that Ned signed?
Yes. Did you get an email as well? I mean.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you? So you have the same ability because you are someone who signed this document. So you can come in and view it as well.
Let's go down and see the difference. Perfect.
Yeah.
So if I would have masked this field here, it would have put all asterisks. Even right here, all you would see is asterisks.
Okay.
But the way I initially set it up, it did not. But it, in flight, I would only see asterisks. You would only see asterisks. Nobody else would see
When I go to
this.
sign it, I see the actual numbers.
Correct. But when you tabbed out of it,
Black
it would
out,
have,
it goes-
you would have seen all asterisks. So, and nobody else other than the sender would be able to view those asterisks.
Right.
Or I mean, the actual,
The numbers.
the real numbers, because they need them for background checks. That are different.
So can you scroll down and see the signatures?
Sure, sure. That's not bad, Marty.
Yeah. So that, you know, that,
Can you highlight it? It's a little hard to see.
Sure, sure.
that first capture, it'll retain as your signature. If you wish to clean it up, you can go in, you know, as just a user of the system, you can log into DocuSign and manage your account, if you will, right? So determine what signature you want to use. If you want to actually, you know, use a mouse or an iPad or whatever, or a font. So
Okay.
then that way, every time you go to sign, it would use that signature.
And this might have been asked while I was filling in the blanks and didn't listen. Can I, if I already have a signature written from a pen, scanned into a PDF, can I dump that into there?
Yes,
I don't know if that was asked, sorry.
that's a good question.
So there's a couple things you can do from here. I think you can print it. Still, if you need a copy of it, put in a file, you can still do that.
And it
We're gonna
prints the
recommend you don't do
asterisks?
Hopefully, we're getting away from that.
It
So-
prints the asterisks or?
From the asterisks, yep. So, there's a clone feature here. If, remember when we set the expiration, to, if I, let's say I set it for 3 days and it expires, so the document you sent out will become full. All the work you've done, you're like, oh, I don't want to have to do this again and start over. You don't have to. You can clone it, it clones everything. So you would just click clone and you have it. You've got the history of who signed what and when. There's certificate, I think. Our security folks are pretty happy about this in terms of, if you're curious who's signing what, there's actual IP addresses. So Maureen, I know you use this IP address.
There's even a location code in there, so you can tell where somebody was when they signed it, if you turn it on. I think if you turn it on when you send it out, or something like that.
Right.
Sometimes you see it on, sometimes you see it off, but in my own testing, I've noticed in this report, I can click a link and see where I was when I signed the document, which is helpful for, you can sign in person. So if you're working, for example, with a donor, and you don't want to ask the donor to sign electronically, you want, you know, there's a ceremony around it, you want to have them sign in person, you can embed that into this routing and sort of know where they were when they signed it. If you have your device there and you say, we're signing in person, and they sign in person, we'll let you know where that happened, because you won't have an IP address to go with it. So that's a really interesting kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's creepy, there's a creepy part. But it's also helpful, you know, sorting out.
Well, from a legal perspective, I'm
Disputes,
sure,
yeah.
yeah, if you're executive, are you sure you did sign this, because the person was in your house?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question, this is just sort of thinking aloud, I don't know if it's possible, but
I'm not in HR, but if I have kind of the same forms that I'm sending out, like the same type of form, and it's just going to different people, after those have been routed for signature and everything's completed, when I would download that form, are there any fields like automatically populated to save it in such a way that, I don't know, like date underscore the name underscore whatever the person's name?
Yeah, it's
Like, just so that I don't have to do anything except click and call it a day, or?
So that's, I mean, that's a great segue. That's
Yep.
kind of where we're headed, right? So, the enterprise document management solution,
Right.
when we looked at these two products, we actually, they have interface integration built between them. So what we need to build, because we're just rolling out the document management solution as well, we haven't built it yet, but that would be exactly right. So we could define a storage path or structure, however you want to name that convention, and then as the document was signed, we would just put it there for you, right? So that you don't have to remember to name it correctly or appropriately, if you will. The other project that Diane mentioned that I'm working on is rolling out the document management solution. As you guys are probably aware, there's lots and lots of places that we store documents, right? Both electronically and in paper. And the two systems that we are looking at are the DocFitting DMS and Oracle DCM. So that, Oracle DCM is your legal portal for all those people that love the legal portal, right? And DocFinity, there's a lot of things.
Contract portal.
Okay.
Call it contract.
Contract
You might
portal.
call it legal portal.
Yeah.
Everybody else call it contract.
Okay. But you can see we have a lot of documents stored electronically already. I'm sure we have a lot more in paper. We probably have multiple copies of all those documents, right? So with our project, we're trying to consolidate those two electronic solutions, build a solution that we can use across campus for any electronic document. So it is designed with both private and restricted data in mind. So we're using our current security guidelines to build and architect this solution so it is secure. And then we're building this integration framework so that if we want to integrate with PeopleSoft, like you're in the hiring process, it's a process in PeopleSoft. But you want that process to generate some paperwork. So we can do that integration, and then we can bring it into a workflow and document management. We can take it out of that workflow and route it for signature through DocuSign. When the signature is complete, it comes back into workflow. We store it where you want it to. We actually can attach a link to the PeopleSoft record, so when you look for somebody in PeopleSoft, you can see the documents that are attached to that electronic employee information file, if you will. So those are kind of downstream, like those are things we want to work on. Right now, we're just working on the migration. So if you want to jump forward. So this is really, Diane talked a little bit about document retrieval. So if you store the document electronically, the first thing we're going to ask you are, what are some of the key fields that you want to know about this, or key pieces of information that we want to take action on? So in this example, this is an SFA appeal, so financial aid appeal. And they said it's really important for them to have the employee ID, the name.n, the appeal type, first, last name, real initial. So what this information, when a document comes in, because we're integrated with PeopleSoft, they'll start typing the employee ID. With that employee ID, we can go to PeopleSoft and get virtually all the rest of this information, right? So unless it's something that's coming off the form, we can bring that information in and store it so that when you want to search, and this is literally the search screen, you could select, I'm looking for an appeal document, or you could say, I just search all the documents because I really don't know what type of document it is, but it's for this employee ID. And you key in the employee ID and it would search all the documents out there. Now, I say that, but understand that within the system, we set up roles and profiles and security that would say, if I'm just an appeals viewer, that means I can only view documents that are SFA appeal type, and I can only view them, I can't edit them. If I'm an administrator on the system, which is the person that did the screenshot for me, right, they get to see everything. So that's why you might look at this and say, wow, there's no controls here, but honestly, you're just looking at a profile of a user that has all control. So we can restrict it down to whatever group of people makes sense, and then return the results. And then as you find the document you're looking for, just click on it, and it'll bring that document back. So this would be using the tool to search through the repository to find something. As I said, In accounts payable, you know, you scan in an invoice and they attach it to a purchase order. So when you go to PeopleSoft, you pull up the purchase order and you click show the invoices, you know, that linkage has been set up by kind of following this process in reverse, right? So we capture the purchase order number and we link it back in PeopleSoft. So that's where, you know, we're able to do a little bit more integration through the workflow than in DocuSign. But because the two tools work together, you know, if there's something that we want to add to this employee personnel file, the electronic version, we can bring it right through here and attach it to PeopleSoft as well. Yes?
So in this example, would there be a field where we could add the retention schedule?
Oh, that's a great question. So the retention policy, what we're doing as we set up these document types, we're working with Dan Newton, who's, you know, one of the archivists, and setting up the retention policy at that time. So it's an electronic, you know, it's a module that we purchased, but, you know, it just says, hey, for this document, if it's 3 years past sign, if it's, you know, 5 years past the close of the project, whatever it is. And then the module, the way we're configuring it currently, is to say these are the documents that should be purged. And you could also set it up to just say these documents are going to be purged, and it just does it automatically, right? But until we get comfortable that it's doing what we expect it to do, right, we're going to bring it back to somebody to have them make the decision that, yeah, this makes sense. And then Dan's working with us to generate a list that says you know, these documents were destroyed on this date, and it goes into their records. So, but that's a great question. So workflow is like, it's not very exciting to watch. It's kind of exciting to build, but it's kind of like looking at your inbox, right? So if you're supposed to be working, you know, on this change request, if that's your workflow, you would, when you logged in, you'd see it, and if there's new work, it would appear in bold to say, hey, there's something new here. But you'd click on it, and then you'd be able to see the documents that are in your work queue, and you take some action based on the information that's here. So, I mean, it is what it is, right? But what it allows us to do, I think, Doug, if you can go on to the next example, kind of comparing the two, right? So, in electronic signature, you're taking a form, you're writing it for signature, and when it's complete, you're going to store it, right? And so this is an example of, you know, the application process, and it's a very high-level example, but basically when an application comes in, there are two reviewers. And so the document is routed to both the reviewers. They both read through the application, and they need to make a decision, yes or no. And if there's consensus, then the document can move on to wherever it needs to go, right? Either we're accepting or rejecting the applicant. If not, it routes it to a third reviewer, and that third reviewer has to review and make a decision. So, you know, there's a little bit more intelligence going on here, right? It's making decisions based on action and feedback by the users. So between all three reviewers, right, they're majority rules. And so if the applicant is accepted, we can then, you know, if they've applied to a specific college, we can route this application onto the college for further review, right? And this is without people having to get involved. I mean, obviously, like Diane said, we went through the process. We had to set the workflow up to begin with. But once we've got the mapping set in place, you know, it doesn't matter if there are 10 applications, 100 applications, 1,000, it's going to follow that same set of logic. Go ahead and click on. So some people like pictures, some people like tables. But you know, if we look at e-signature, to me, that's like the first step in going, you know, electronic, right? We have a lot of forms that are already either in Word or in PDF, but this allows us to go digital, right? To keep that thing digital all the way through. We don't ever have to print it out, sign it, you know, fax it back or whatever. What's great about e-signature is that it's, you know, quick for testing and routing. You know, you guys are going to be empowered to do all of this yourselves. So, you know, it allows you to quickly modify things if you say, hey, this is what I, you know, like, invariably you sit in a room, you're like, these are the 4 things that we need to do, and then after you get back to your desk, like, oh, really, it's 5, or it's optionally this. So this allows you complete control, right? So you can figure out where does it need to get routed to, who does it need to get approved by. It does do the simple routing, for approval. And, I would say you could stay totally in the e-signature world if you're not looking for integration with other systems, right? It's very powerful, and you can, see in the example, it's very straightforward, right? In document management, this is the repository that if you have private restricted data, OCIO security is going to guide you to this repository. So it's our approved solution for that data. If you have complex routing, so again, making decisions based on information that's completed in the form, or as it moves through step by step, if you have to take an action based on previous action. System integration and automation. So going into PeopleSoft, updating PeopleSoft, getting data out of PeopleSoft, or other systems that we use on the campus. And then one version of the truth, and really what that's about is, again, if I have a piece of paper and I keep a copy of my desk and I forward it on to Doug and he writes something new on it and puts a copy at his desk and 5, 6 people down the road, the end version of the document is not the same document that I have, right? So I don't have all the handwritten notes. If I put it all in the EDM, there's one repository. Everybody that should have access to it does have access to it. When we should get rid of it, we get rid of it, right? That's also, a lot of people retain information because they think, oh, it's great to have. It's also a liability, right? So we know that, we get a public records request and we'll have to produce it. Well, if we have it all here, number one, it's going to be very easy to produce, right? We can search through all the keywords and find whatever it is they're looking for. So those are the two systems. We have 5 more minutes, so I don't know if you want any more questions or. Diane?
Well, let's talk timeline. Timeline was your next slide. So, electronic signatures. We expect, we have the 400 folks who've been involved in this pilot up to now. We're going to have a time where we need to convert them, because we've learned a lot about how to secure things properly and so forth, and everybody and his brother has an opinion about how we should set this thing up, so we've gotten all those opinions, and now we have to set it up based on all those opinions. So we need some time to convert the pilot groups to the new sort of production way we're going to roll this out. We expect that to happen May, June kind of time frame. And then over summer, I think what you'll start to see happening is human resources and business and finance reaching out to the university community to get folks together to look at these common forms like I-9 or like, the setting up a vendor form, these kinds of things, the things that we use on a daily basis, and getting some feedback on how do we set them up as a template once so that everybody can use the same forms, and you don't have to set it up for yourself. You don't have to set it up for yourself. All you have to do is initiate getting it sent out for signatures, and where it says unit approver, you put in the right person. That all you're doing is assigning people to those roles and getting the form sent out. So we expect that to happen over the course of the summer. And actually, I'm going to a meeting this afternoon with Chris Devine and Kevin Patton to talk through our implementation plan and get their buy-in and approval for that, so that we can come back and communicate to all of you, okay, here's exactly how we're going to roll this out. But it'll probably be some kind of unit by unit, and there will be some training that folks will have to go through to be senders, and that includes all of you. And then for electronic document management, we're already in the process of shutting down, of converting, so mostly it's enrollment services and undergraduate education. And who else are you working with right now, big unit, or is it mostly EC?
Well, each has most of the workflow, but it's accounts payable, it's arts and sciences,
Yeah.
it's athletics, there's.
Well, we have 4 or 5 units that have a lot of, they're using an old document management system. They're actually using 2 different old document management systems. So what Steve and his team are doing right now is working with them to convert their stuff from the old system to the new. And you see the timeline here for that. That's the conversion of DMS and DCM users.
Right.
And it looks like we're looking at a university launch of that service. I can't translate Q3 into months, so you'll have to explain to me when Q3 2015.
So yeah, Q3 is kind of soft, right? July, August is what we're looking at. As Diane said.
Fall-ish, I get fall-ish.
Okay. Is that fall or is that still summer?
Solve this.
There you go. All right. But yeah, so we're focused, in really both e-signature and EDM, we're focused on migrating the current either pilot or existing users of the system. And once we get those folks migrated over, being able to embrace the wider university audience. And I think, you know, with both of these, it's going to be working with you and your organizations to roll it out, right? So while we're going to say, hey, it's available, policies approved, systems available, it's going to be a little bit of sitting down, understanding, you know, who the folks you want to train, right? Making sure you're all comfortable with what the process is, and then, if you will, turning it on, but it'll already be there, but, you know, getting you guys really engaged in using it.
So if it's all right, we'll work together on a follow-up conversation when we get closer to, when we get the policy, you know, checked. And, you know, we have an implementation plan ready to go. We'd like to come back to this group and talk to you about, get your feedback on what we intend to do for implementation, and then talk about how we start to schedule things.
We would appreciate that, that would be great.
Sure. Be happy to. And if, in the meantime, you would like to invite Steve and Doug to your area to go over this in depth, please reach out to them.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.